thing called hope. How many of you bought a lottery ticket last month when the Powerball was something like $2 billion? I know I did. I hoped I would win, but I didn't. That's why when I found out that this week's Advent subject was hope, I was a little perplexed. I thought I knew what hope was, but I didn't, not really. So I decided to do a deep dive into the spiritual foundations of hope. Please join me as we explore that thing called hope. Let's start with a little meditation. Today's meditation is based on Psalm 62, verse 5. For God alone my soul waits in silence, for my hope is from Him. Take a few deep cleansing breaths. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. My belief in goodness of the world, of others, of myself, and of my higher power begins with hope. Maybe hope is all I can muster after a period of doubt or disappointment. As I feel hopeful, I begin to believe that new possibilities and better outcomes are available to me. My hopeful feeling leads to faith, a certainty that the goodness I could only sense before is the actual nature of life. With faith, I now direct my thoughts toward goodness, wholeness, and my heart's desires. With gratitude for my awakening, I use faith to dismantle doubt and limitation. I hold only the best thoughts for myself. I know and feel in the depths of my soul that the good I desire is already mine. With unwavering hope, faith, and deep gratitude, I claim it now. Come back to the room. Hope is that thing inside us that insists, despite all evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits us if we have the courage to reach for it and to work for it and to fight for it. That's a quote by Barack Obama. I was inspired to look up quotes on hope by our former president after I recalled his 2006 book, The Audacity of Hope. I realized then that authentic hope, hope that is life-changing, is bold and daring. It's audacious. It shows a willingness to take surprisingly bold risks, not like the wimpy version of hope I displayed when I bought the Powerball ticket. Here's what one of my favorite self-help authors, Brené Brown, says about hope. In my work, I've found that moving out of powerlessness and even despair requires hope. Hope is not an emotion, it's a cognitive process, a thought process made up of a trilogy of goals, pathways, and agency. Agency is the capacity to act, to use your own power. Hope happens when we can set goals, have the tenacity and perseverance to pursue those goals, and believe in our own abilities to act. That helps my head's understanding of hope. But what about my heart? What about my soul? This all came together for me when I read an Advent sermon from one of my favorite spiritual teachers, Nadia Bolz-Weber, entitled Prophets of a Different Story, a short Advent sermon from inside a women's prison. It's about someone who had lost hope. She starts her message with a Bible passage from the Gospel of Luke. There was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly order of Abijah. His wife was descended from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Both of them were righteous before God, living blamelessly according to all the commandments and the regulations of the Lord. But they had no children because Elizabeth was barren, and both were getting on in years. Once when he was serving as priest before God during his section's turn of duty, there appeared to him an angel of the Lord standing at the right side of the altar. When Zechariah saw him, he was terrified, and fear overwhelmed him. But the angel said, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayers have been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will name him John. Even before his birth, he will be filled with the Holy Spirit. He will turn many of the people of Israel into the Lord their God." Zechariah said to the angel, "How can I know this will happen? For I am an old man and my wife is getting on in years." The angel replied, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God and have been sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. But now, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their time, you will become mute, unable to speak until the day these things occurred." This is where the gospel reading ends. Boltz-Weber goes on to say in her sermon, "In our gospel for today, Zechariah, who's this old priest dude, was just sort of going about his business in the temple when he was visited by an angel, which sounds nice having angels visit you, but just to be clear, we aren't talking about the little chubby baby angels of Hallmark cards. No, man, angels in the Bible are terrifying. They scare the bejesus out of people. I mean, why else would the very first thing out of the mouths of every single angel in the Bible be, "Don't be scared"? Like their heavenly employee manual says, never attempt to deliver your message from God until you have completely calmed the humans down first. So anyway, the Archangel Gabriel visits this old guy, Zechariah, and he told him this totally bonkers thing. He said that Zechariah's wife Elizabeth would conceive a son named John. Spoiler alert, it's John the Baptist. As in Zechariah's very old, very barren wife Elizabeth. And instead of just shutting up and nodding his head obediently, when the terrifying angel delivered the message from God, Zechariah did what I'm pretty sure I would do. Zechariah thinks he knows better, and so he questions the angel's authority. He's like, are you sure? Because seriously, my wife is old, like old. To which the angel says, "Human, please." And don't miss this part because it's amazing. The angel then proceeds to make Zechariah completely mute until all these things had taken place, like the angel said they would. It was like a 9-month talking time out for Zechariah. At that point, I started to wonder why exactly Zechariah didn't believe an angel who came to him saying that God was giving him and his wife a child, the one thing they had prayed for, hoped for so long. And here's the thing. I wonder if Zechariah was reluctant to believe this good news that Elizabeth would bear a son, not because he thought he knew more than both God and the angels. I wonder if Zechariah was reluctant to believe this good news that Elizabeth would bear a son because he thought he already knew his own story. I mean, not that I blame him. I can't imagine I'd be any more faithful than he was. I mean, I've said it before. I know I suffer from the disease of alcoholism, but what I feel I really suffer from is a disease called first thought wrong. So, I feel for Zechariah. But the point is that I wonder if Zechariah also had first thought wrong. Because maybe he had become so comfortable with the story he told himself and that others had told him about what his life looks like and what it will always look like. And so he couldn't believe another story was even possible. Maybe he was so used to him and Elizabeth being the childless old couple that even as he prayed for children, he had actually foreclosed on any other story ever really being possible for them. So I wonder, maybe his enforced period of silence was actually what allowed him to receive a new story. Because as his elderly wife's belly grew large with a miracle child, he couldn't say a word. He just had to receive it. As Elizabeth's young cousin Mary visited and told of the child she herself carried, and as Zachariah's child leapt in Elizabeth's womb, he could not say a word. He just had to receive it. As the socially unacceptable fertility of God that would change the entire world grew in the unlikely wombs of an old lady and a virgin teenager, he could not say a word. He could only receive it. It was as though God said, "You want to see what I'm all about? Well then, shut up about your old story and receive this new one." Maybe that is an invitation for us as well, that we too could take opportunities to just be quiet and listen for a new story, or maybe just a whole new way of understanding the old one. I know there are stories about who I am, what I've done, who has hurt me, and what I deserve. There are those stories of mine that are so totally worn smooth by my retelling of them that I no longer think to ask myself, are they most true? Are they the most true thing? Or could the facts, like the actual facts of my life, be reassembled to tell a different story that is equally true and maybe makes me less of a victim, or at the very least makes me less miserable? Maybe when our opinions and neuroses and pride and expectations about who we are and what we've done and who has hurt us and what we deserve die down, maybe when we just shut up and sit in this quiet of Advent, we might begin to see where something else is possible, something holy and waiting to be born in an unlikely time and place, much like the birth of Jesus itself. What was the Christ event if not God telling this faithless and heartbreaking world that a different story is possible? Telling us that God was, God is, and God will continue redeeming all of creation through means that we could never come up with, through means like pregnant old ladies and messiahs born among sheep and straw. Loving the enemy and forgiveness of sins, and self-giving love and resurrection of wounded bodies. These are things we just can't perceive when we are too busy telling worn-out old stories about ourselves, of others, and the world itself. It was a gift, really, this muteness of Zacharias, because his silence, he got to see a story unfold around him that he never could have come up with himself. So maybe when we silence the narratives about ourselves and others and the world itself that run repeat in our heads, that we have believed were the truth for so long, we get to embrace the terrifying beauty of what's possible without what's possible being imprisoned to what's come before. Which means that, at its core, Advent is an invitation to be prophets of a different story. So may you, every single one of you, be prophets to each other, prophets of a different story, a better story, a more hopeful story, a subversively beautiful story about what is possible this Advent season. A story worthy of you all as children of a king. Amen. So now I get it. You don't have to wait until God sends a scary angel down to push your mute button. You can be your own prophet of a different story. The very audacity of envisioning a world beyond the present gives birth to the idea that what you desire is possible. Then who can challenge it? Nobody. It is finding the courage to utter the first word of your new story in public. It takes all the strength we can muster. It is learning to say quietly, without any doubt, I think differently about this now. It is simply a declaration that there is something new happening in the realm of spirit. It is a call to consciousness. It is a thing called hope.